they're going to say they weren't committing fraud, they were wrong, and they're going to say it's not. I'm just saying this, and everybody, this is like when I told everybody you're never going to find a judge who's going to throw out votes even that are illegal for the 2020 election because they won't do it. And people said, "Oh, but you're." So look, I'm just telling you the truth, and that was the truth, by the way. The judges wouldn't even take up legitimate election challenges. You're not going to find any aspect of the legal process, I think, that is going to be willing to punish any of these big pharma companies because they did it all at the explicit instruction of the federal government.
Now, Buck, this is not going to surprise you. But Canada is, we've talked about this before. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are what the United States might well have ended up with if one of two things had been the case. If we didn't have federalism, or if Ron DeSantis wasn't the governor of Florida.
I think it might have even been able to override federalism. I think without Florida, all the dominoes fall.
So we've argued, and I do believe it's true, that the most consequential governor's election in most of our lives, and we didn't know it at the time, may well have been 2018 Florida, because Andrew Gillum came within 30,000 votes of being the governor of Florida, and I think he would have locked down Florida, assuming he wasn't in prison or involved in gay sex orgies. Maybe he still would have been. But I think he would have locked down Florida like New York got locked down, like California got locked down, like so many blue states and blue cities did. So Canada is now offering a 5th COVID shot. You can't get into Canada unless you have had the COVID shot. So my father-in-law lives across the Detroit River down on Grosse Ile. For those of you who know the Detroit, Michigan area, you can see Canada from across the Detroit River where he lives. We used to be able to, he's got a little boat you can jot over, you can hang out in Canada a little bit, just phone it in. I'm not even allowed to cross into Canada because I haven't gotten the COVID shot. They have gone completely, and we've got a lot of Canadian listeners, and we know all of you are experiencing this right now. A 5th shot, Buck. And by the way, the 5th shot should certainly take care of it. The first 4 didn't. 5 is the right number. It's always been the right number. Of course, I'm joking. When does this end? When will there be a number? Because there are a lot of sheep that are rolling up their sleeves. Justin Trudeau is going to be out there with his shirt sleeve rolled up, getting that 5th shot, arguing that all the sheep have to do the 5th shot. What is the number, Buck, where people will finally say, you know what, I'm not lining up and going to get another booster?
We're 2 years away, in my estimation, from everybody who pushed all this stuff as though they were saving lives. Everyone who pushed the maniacal, idiotic, anti-scientific policies of 2 weeks to slow the spread, to lockdowns, to masking outdoors, masking indoors, masking on planes, masking children, shutting down schools, mandatory vaccine, get fired from your job, vaccine passports. The people who did all of that, which was atrocious and wrong, and they should be ashamed, within 2 years they'll be like, yeah, that was a crazy time when that stuff was going on. Man, what was that all about? Because it's gonna take time. It's gonna fade out. This is often the case with authoritarianism. It just collapses under its own absurdity over time when people just realize this isn't something that they're going to enforce, and I don't actually have to do this anymore. But there's a lot of people that still choose, and that's why it's gonna take some time. They still choose.
What do you think the number is? Because it is kind of funny. And you've probably seen, some of you out there have seen, like, with the 10th shot, you get a free, Subway, or you get a free smoothie, like all those loyalty reward cards where you would get them stamped, and like on the 10th one, you get a free one. I mean, we're at 5. How long are people still going? Like, 6 is certainly going to be here at some point.
There is, I would say, 20% of the United States population has decided that they are, and they're also the ones who are magically the most likely to have Ukraine flags, the most likely to share their pronouns when nobody asks for them, the most likely to think AOC is intelligent. 20% of Americans, I think at this point.
You think they'll go to 10?
I think they will get a shot. They will get a series even, 2 shots a year, every year until their 10th shot. And then I think the mockery from people like you and me will finally be enough for them to just start to fade out from it, right?
So you think there'll be guys going to 10. And do you am I being too aggressive? Because you heard yesterday we had Alex Berenson on. I'd encourage you to go listen to that. He was on with us in the third hour. And I said, I think we should have criminal investigations of the Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson CEOs, the larger corporate apparatus, to find out when they knew that these shots were not effective, like we know that they are, and how much fraud they propagated onto the American public.
This is the problem. They're going to say they weren't committing fraud, they were wrong. And they're going to say it's not. I'm just saying this, and everybody, this is like when I told everybody you're never going to find a judge who's going to throw out votes even that are illegal for the 2020 election because they won't do it. And people said, "Oh, but you're." So look, I'm just telling you the truth, and that was the truth, by the way. The judges wouldn't even take up legitimate election challenges. You're not going to find any aspect of the legal process, I think, that is going to be willing to punish any of these big pharma companies because they did it all at the explicit instruction of the federal government. Operation Warp Speed, my friends, we funded this with our taxpayer dollars. Some of this was done under a Republican, Donald Trump's time in office. Now, we knew a lot less then. He's worth, he deserves, I should say, far less criticism, a fraction of the criticism for this, because we didn't have the data. The Democrats saw the data and said, we don't care. We like this. Mask up or else. The Democrats were psychopaths about this. In the spring of 2020, it was, oh, my gosh, this is really scary. What are we going to do? It was a different understanding of what we were facing. But the big pharma companies, Clay, they were indemnified. I mean, this is the biggest fraud, and it was perpetrated against us by our own government. And people begged for the government to perpetrate the fraud.
What I believe should happen here is I think the Republicans, it's not going to be signed by Biden, certainly you're going to take back the House, should introduce a bill guaranteeing everybody their jobs back and also getting them paid for back pay if you lost your jobs over COVID. Why I think there could be a fraud claim here, Buck. I think you should also introduce a bill saying we want all of your profits returned to the United States government, or we're going to allow plaintiffs' attorneys to sue you. We're going to remove your protection against lawsuits because you have behaved fraudulently. And here's where I think the fraud is, Buck. I think there was knowledge that these shots were not working when the CEOs and their corporate spokespeople continued to say publicly that there were. And I think if you did a deep dive investigation on it, what you would find is they had data proving that what they were saying publicly was not supported by what their private data
I think what
reflected.
you are saying is true. I think the problem, though, is going to be a version of what we saw with Russia collusion, whereby, and I know that seems like what could the pharma companies have to do with the FBI and the deep state? They will say, well, it was our call. It was in our purview to make the determination. And basically, we're so stupid that we got it that wrong. So in the case of the FBI, we're so dumb that we actually believe that Carter Page and
it's not fraud, it's incompetence.
It's not fraud, it's incompetence.
Defense.
Exactly right. And I think that's what ultimately the pharma companies will say, oh, there's so much noise, so much data. We did, unless you can get, to your point, the CEO, Albert Bourla being like, this is the most crap vaccine in the history of vaccine I've never seen.
Think if he were on,
I wouldn't give this vaccine to my dog, and I hate my dog. Like, unless you get Albert Bourla doing that, they're never going to face consequences.
I think he would say it. And, Buck, what I would say is, at some point, extreme incompetence in a plaintiff context lawsuit becomes negligence. right? So if you are so incompetent, you're like, hey, I wasn't, I'm not responsible for this accident in the car. I was just, like a bad driver at that point in time. Like the negligence itself becomes difficult. Now, criminally, yes, criminally incompetence is a defense, but in a civil lawsuit that was seeking to disgorge profits in conjunction also with a potential criminal investigation, I think the negligence standard from these companies would be reached. And that's why I've always been one of the most nervous things about getting the shots was I said, hey, if these shots are so safe, why do we have to promise all
why
these
they have
drug
to be
companies
indemnified?
that we would
why they have
never
to get
sue them?
a total protection from, look, whenever these things happen, you again, I like these analogies that are a stretch, but they make the point. There was something ultra shady in the initial Epstein plea bargain in Florida. Actually, it was the federal attorney, federal prosecutor, because it was for future co-conspirators that weren't even named. That's in a plea bargain. That's crazy.
Yeah.
There's something shady with a shot that's so super duper duper safe that the government also has to say, don't worry, shot makers. You cannot be sued no matter what. This can make people grow a third head and turn their noses blue. You can't be sued for this.
And just think about
I guess
it,
by the way, it'd be a
outside of the
second head.
context.
Third head would be really weird,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean.
Outside of the context of the drug shot itself, imagine that you went into a bar to get a beer and you sat down at the bar and they said, yeah, you can have a beer. But before you have that beer, I want you to sign a waiver of liability in the event that this beer is not safe.
I mean, our brewery's had a few issues here and there. We got a little bit of a vermin problem. Just sign this release before you have this beer. It's totally safe.
Would you ever drink a beer in a bar that you had to give a release?
Clay,
or frankly,
I won't even
eat in a restaurant.
I won't even go into restaurants that get a B for their health inspection grade here in New York City. I see that and I go, ew.
Oh, I don't even know how to look up in health inspection.
They have a giant letter in the window.
Yeah, right. But like, I go to fast food restaurants. I mean, I've given up on my health
fast food restaurants are actually very clean, generally. They actually have very high cleanliness standards because it's also automated and standardized. It's occasionally, you're in some place that you're like, hey, this is the best place ever. And then you find out that it got a C for its health inspection. You go, oh, gross.
That's not ideal.
You can look up on the New York City website, by the way, and I did it. I'm going to tell you the truth. I went to a Basque restaurant downtown once. Went on a date there. This is like 10 years ago. And I'm like, this place is so fancy. Basque food from the region of Spain. And then after I walked past it a few days later.
I didn't even know where Basque food was from.
Yeah, Catalonia.
I bet the vast majority of people did not know either. I was like, I don't know where Basque food is.
There are Basque separatists. There's a Basque terrorist organization. We can talk Basque all day here.
I know the phrases exist, but I didn't know what country it was in.
So it's like Spanish food. Anyway, don't tell a Basque that. But I walked past the restaurant. I saw what the grade was, and it was a C. And then I looked at, because you can go online. I'm like, oh my God, what do they have there? Rats in the produce.
Oh no.
Yeah. And then of course I was like, my stomach felt a little weird the next day. Then your head starts playing games with you. It's almost as bad as what you get in New York City, which is what I call pigeon backwash, which is where you're walking down the street and a pigeon flies so close to your face that you feel the wings push air on your. It happens to you. You get a little feather in your face. Those flying rats. This is what doesn't happen to country people. It only happens here to us city dwellers.
I don't spend much time around pigeons.